Welcome back, to those still brave or foolish enough to follow. Last time, you heard the echoes of Hitori Kakurenbo, right? A game that opened the door to something hungry. You witnessed the battle in that cursed house, and the screams that never truly ended. Tonight, the darkness has learned your name. Stay close. This is only the beginning of your nightmares.
As everyone began scattering to flee that haunted mental health consultation center, no longer able to bear the memories of the samurai Djinns, Dr. Norman did not rise from his chair. He watched them with hollow eyes, as though trying to decide whether he would follow or remain a prisoner of the past. His voice cut through the rustling footsteps, forcing all of us to pause at the threshold.
Before you all run back to your mosques, temples, churches, or whatever,
he said softly.
Tell me something.
He looked at each of us, searching for an answer that would free him from the terror circling his own life.
If God exists, if he is watching, why has he done nothing? Why did he let the Djinns butcher us? Why do we sit here in a ruin, clutching old books and old myths, pretending they can save us from the darkness inside ourselves? Why?
His voice cracked, just once, then hardened again.
Answer me that, or go.
Tonight feels heavier than any night I have survived. Even as I draw breath, I feel the memory of the samurai Djinns pressing against my ribs. I remember the screams. I remember the impossible speed with which they slaughtered Dr. Norman's Djinn legions, creatures I once believed no power could touch. Perhaps he believes that by staring into the aftermath, we might discover the truth about ourselves, about what comes next. We survivors have become strange kin, all of us bound by secrets. All of us carrying scars no one else will ever see. Agent Tobias leans in the corner, arms folded as though nothing can surprise him anymore. But when the lamplight catches his face, I see the weariness etched there, the quiet grief of a man who has watched too many fall. Jason Leo sits closest to the door, as if part of him still dreams of running. Once he was a cynic, a man who trusted nothing but money. Then Islam found him. Or perhaps he found it. Either way, faith remade him. Jahangir clasps his battered Quran against his chest. It is an anchor he refuses to drop, even as forces beyond human comprehension swirl around us. His faith is real, though even he has stumbled. The hexed food Dr. Norman gave him. It broke something precious. Oh, may Allah forgive him. Cynthia Kartika pretends calm, but I see the crack in her eyes. She wears her hijab like a shield, though in truth she never believed. Only a costume to make Malaysia more hospitable to her poverty. Now she drifts between guilt and the memory of her survival. Pravanesh and Nandini sit side by side, silent, their hands occasionally brushing as if to remind each other, we are still alive. And me, I am simply a woman who loved too fiercely, who lost too much, and who cannot stop believing that somewhere in all this horror is a mercy waiting to be born. I was not always so certain. Once I was young and loud and foolish. I believed the Malaysian dream could fill the hollow in my chest. I believed a hippie's life, nights of music, skin against skin, was freedom. Hubert Fernandez and I, we were children of colonial leftovers, drunk on Western melodies and cheap whiskey. I thought nothing could matter more than applause. Then Latif Kasturi walked into that smoky bar. Latif was different. Even then I sensed it, the gravity in his spirit. He picked up his bass guitar like a man lifting prayer beads. When he spoke of faith, it was never as a performance. It was an ache. When he began his journey into the Jamaat Tabligh, I thought he was abandoning me. But he was only walking toward the purpose his soul had been crying for. He asked me to follow, to leave the hollow nights behind. I said yes. Our marriage was the death of the Amak and Abba. The music ended. Hubert disappeared into Rosalina's gilded prison. Marcus and Jaffa drifted away. And Latif, he grew into a man whose prayers lit every room he entered. I was with him when he boarded the plane for New Zealand. His face calm, his eyes bright. He had joined the Daqwa, 4-month Kharuj. He wanted to bring the strayed back to Islam. They say he was shot while shielding a Western boy near the masjid's entrance. Some call it martyrdom. I only call it love. Today, as the memory of the Amak and Abba flickered in my mind, another face came to me. A small boy with wide, solemn eyes. He was always sitting quietly near Marcus's amplifier, a paper bag of cheap crackers clutched in his hands. I never asked who he was. I thought perhaps he was just a neighbor's child, tagging along because no one wanted to watch him. But tonight, as Jason Leo sat closest to the door, grown, silent, clinging to his faith, I knew. I knew in the hollow of my bones. He was that boy. The child Marcus used to bring to every rehearsal. The child who never smiled, who watched us drown ourselves in cheap whiskey and loud accords. Tears blurred my sight. I rose from my chair and went to him. He looked up, startled, and for a moment I saw recognition.
Mark Chick,
he whispered. His voice broke on the word.
are you Auntie Khadija?
I nodded, unable to speak. He swallowed, fighting tears.
My father, Marcus, he died.
He said.
Long ago, in a raid on the drug gangs. He never came home.
I pressed my hand to my mouth. The grief came in waves, old unburied sorrow. I'm so sorry, I whispered. He wiped his eyes.
I always wondered if you remembered me.
He said.
If you knew that the little boy with the crackers was me.
I drew him into my arms. For a moment, there was no haunted consultation center, no samurai Djinns, no Dr. Norman. Only a boy who had become a man, and an old woman who could not stop weeping. I stroked his hair the way I never dared when he was small. You were always my son in some quiet corner of my heart, I said. He nodded, his tears soaking my niqab.
You look so different,
he whispered.
but I think you are even braver now.
Tonight, as we sit in this haunted consultation center, I feel Latif beside me. And I wonder what he would make of this gathering. This desperate search for answers after the samurai Djinns destroyed everything Dr. Norman thought he controlled. We were supposed to discuss that, the origin of the samurai Djinns, the secret cabal that finances Norman's experiments. But instead, Norman decided to begin with his favorite sport, breaking faith. Dr. Norman leans back in his chair, steepling his fingers.
Let's be honest.
He said, his voice smooth as poison.
All this talk of God, Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, it's just folklore. Stories to soothe primitive minds. Why cling to it? What has religion ever built that reason could not build better?
The words fell like stones. Jason Leo tried first.
Islam rebuilt my life. It gave me purpose when nothing else did.
Norman smiled, thin as a knife.
Purpose? And what purpose is that? To bow 5 times a day? To parrot verses you don't understand? You traded one emptiness for another.
Jason flushed, his jaw working. Jahangir spoke next, voice shaking.
My Quran tells me Allah is closer to me than my own jugular vein.
Reciting lines from a book proves nothing.
Norman said.
Your ancestors recited poems to Baal and Moloch. Faith is just the noise terrified men make before the grave.
Cynthia Kartika, emboldened by Norman, added,
If God were real, would he let this world decay like this? Would he watch any of us die for nothing?
Dr. Norman leaned forward, voice tightening.
Let me be perfectly clear. You all sit here clutching your books, your dreams, your stories about angels and djinns and the end of days. But you forget every civilization you cherish, every convenience you use was built by secular minds. Electricity, medicine, the phone in your pocket, all of it, not the result of revelation, but of reason. Islam, you say, once birthed empires, the Abbasids, the Ottomans, and yet, look around you. Every so-called Islamic nation today depends on Western banking, Western science, Western weapons. You condemn the West while living on its table scraps. And tell me, where has your faith gotten you? You recite verses while your leaders steal from you. You cover your women in black clothing while your economies rot. You teach your children to hate the unbeliever, then beg that same unbeliever for visas, technology, and loans. You want to rebuild civilization with prayer? Show me the laboratory built by prayer alone. Show me the vaccine discovered by wuduk. Show me the bridge erected by a single ayah from your Quran. You cannot, because belief without progress is just nostalgia. And nostalgia is a slow poison.
Jason Leo rebuked, his voice low.
You are twisting everything. Faith can inspire progress.
Dr. Norman sneered.
Really? Show me the evidence. You think Islam is immune to the rot that infects every organized religion? The sectarianism, the corruption, the superstition. Your own scholars argue over which hadith to accept, while your politicians steal zakat money. You keep waiting for a Mahdi to rescue you from yourselves. You forget that no savior is coming. If you want to save this world, you need fewer prophets and more engineers.
Nandini spoke up timidly.
But there is beauty in believing there is a purpose.
Dr. Norman cuts her off before she could finish.
Purpose. Purpose is what men invent when they cannot face their insignificance. You claim your God has a plan, but you cannot show me the plan. You cling to a fable because the alternative, that the universe is indifferent, is too terrifying. And I understand that terror, but I will not pretend myth is truth just because the truth is harsh.
Stephen Chow interjected, his voice trembling.
Dr. Norman, your cynicism blinds you. There are things science cannot measure.
Dr. Norman looked at him and replied coldly.
Like what? Souls, spirits. Tell me, Father, did your God weep for the dead in the Holocaust? Or did the Palestinians die because a bullet does not care about prayer? Be honest with yourself.
Jahangir repeated himself, his voice breaking.
My Lord is closer to me than my jugular vein.
Dr. Norman scoffed.
And yet here you sit, terrified. If your Lord is so close, why must you fear me? Why must you fear death, or doubt, or losing your place in this hierarchy of piety? You fear because deep down, you know, faith is no armor. It is a story you repeat to keep the dark at bay.
I felt the old grief claw at my throat. Nandini tried next.
Perhaps suffering is part of a greater plan.
Dr. Norman laughed.
Ha 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 ha. Suffering is virtue? What a convenient lie. Aha. Let the sheep believe their slaughter has meaning. At least they die content. Aha.
3 times we answered. 3 times he cut us down. Even Stephen Chow, the exorcist priest, lifted a trembling hand.
Dr. Norman, you cannot dismiss the spirit entirely.
Norman interrupted, his eyes cold.
Father, your church burns scholars alive. Spare me lectures on truth, huh?
Each of us fell silent. Even Agent Tobias looked away. And then, Intherai lifted his head. He said simply,
Umi, tell them the dream.
So I told it. I told them of Inthera's night vision, how he stood before the prophet, peace be upon him, and how beyond even that radiant figure there was the presence of Allah himself. Not with these eyes of clay, but with a seeing born of the soul. And in that light, the command came. This Ummah must dare what the first believers dared at Quba Mosque, Yathrib, to surrender every possession, every comfort, every illusion of ownership. The wealth Allah has loaned us must be returned to Him. For only when Muslims abandon the worship of paper currencies, usury, and the hunger for dominance, will Allah return the trust of leading humanity. And once that trust returns, the Ummah will become the guardians of all faiths, not their tyrants. We will protect Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, and all other religions, including those with no belief at all, because in protecting them, we protect the honor of Islam. The cost will be everything. It will look like ruin, poverty, humiliation. But after that, prosperity beyond measure flowing from justice. That is what Indera was shown. Dr. Norman stared at me a long moment. Then he laughed, a hollow, weary sound.
So this is your revelation?
He said.
A vision telling you to cast off the world, to embrace poverty, to rebuild civilization with piety?
He spread his hands.
Fine, do it. I challenge you. Show me your miracle. Show me your God. And when you fail, when your followers scatter, I will be here to remind you, mankind was always alone.
His laughter echoed like a curse. But in that laughter, I heard fear. And so, as the lamps guttered, I looked around the circle. Pravanesh, weeping silently. Cynthia, uncertain. Jahangir, gripping his Quran as if it were the last rope keeping him from the abyss. Even Stephen Chow bowed his head, whispering Latin prayers he could no longer trust. And in that quiet, I understood. This meeting was never truly about the samurai Djinns, or even the Cabal. It was about our last chance to choose, to believe, to surrender. Perhaps tomorrow the secret banks will send their assassins. Perhaps the samurai Djinns will return. Perhaps Dr. Norman and Agent Tobias will not survive the month. But tonight we were reminded of the price of faith. And as for me, an old woman whose heart has been broken and mended too many times, I will not walk the last miles alone. If Allah wills, before this ends, I will find the courage to ask Hubert to bind his life to mine. A sacred marriage, 2 weary souls sharing the last of their strength. Until then, I will hold the memory of Latif's sacrifice. I will hold the promise of Inthera's dream, and I will walk into whatever darkness comes, with my head unbowed. Yet as I closed my eyes, believing I could endure anything, I did not see what was rising in the heart of my own blood. Aduka. He had listened to every word in the shadows beyond the broken archway. Listened, and turned colder with each promise I spoke. My son, whom I once believed would inherit in the Ra's vision, was becoming something else. Aduka stepped into the dying lamplight and looked at us as though we were insects clinging to an empty gospel. His voice was steady, too steady.
"Oh, Mayumi,"
he said.
"I will not be chained to your delusions. I will not watch humanity surrender itself to an age of superstition dressed as virtue."
I tried to answer him, but he raised his hand.
"You think the West is the disease, that poverty is holiness? You are wrong. Your dreams are a poison more lethal than any weapon Dr. Norman could devise. You want to tear down everything, every engine, every library, every scaffold of reason so you can rule over the ashes, whispering that God willed it."
His eyes moved across the room, resting on Indira last.
"And you,"
he said softly.
"You were always the favorite child, the chosen one, but you are blind. All of you are blind. I will not let you drag this world backward."
His voice dropped to a whisper, but I felt the blade inside it.
"I will oppose you. I will gather those who will not kneel. And when your faith is shattered and your dream lies rotting, you will remember that I offered you mercy."
Then he turned and disappeared into the blackness beyond the door. In that moment, I knew. Aduka had become our final adversary. After Aduka turned and disappeared into the blackness beyond the door, the last of our small company found the strength to move again. One by one, we gathered our few belongings. No one spoke to Dr. Norman. No one dared. At the threshold, the others turned to each other. Pravanesh and Nandini, Jason and Jahangir, Cynthia and Stephen, and offered quiet words of gratitude. For standing together. For surviving one more night. Even Agent Tobias allowed himself a small nod. But Dr. Norman remained seated in the shadows, unmoving. And so we stepped out into the day. We carried the knowledge that our country, our Malaysia, was no longer merely wounded by its own divisions. It was now a prize. 2 superpowers had turned their gaze upon us. And neither would rest until Malaysia was broken or conquered. Yet even knowing this, even feeling the weight of Aduka's betrayal and Dr. Norman's contempt, I found a spark of resolve. No matter how many enemies gathered beyond our borders, or within our blood, I would walk forward with my head unbowed.
Before you go, I invite you to share this story with someone who still believes in the power of faith, or someone who has sworn it off forever. Please like this video if it unsettled you, comment below with your thoughts or your own encounters with the darkness, and subscribe to Haunted Burrow so you never miss the next descent into the unknown. And if you dare, share this episode with a friend who thinks they're safe from nightmares. Until we meet again, sweet dreams, and even sweeter nightmares.